Okay, we have the green bars, we have the live counter sticking up, so should now be live, which of course means welcome back to the Storytime Network. We're back with more.
What if when the aliens invade, we learn that actually there were wizards?
I do not know.
So bear with me here. A pretty popular subgenre of spec fiction in general is the whole advanced civilization invades. Yes?
Yeah.
My idea is, given that human civilization is 120,000 years old, roughly, or not civilization, but humanity as like anatomically modern humans are roughly 120,000 years old, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a long time, and our historical record is actually quite poor. So, my speculation is thus. What if... So, have you watched Invincible? The animated show?
No, not the animated show.
Are you familiar with the comics, or like, is there...
I'm familiar with the concept of the show, vaguely.
Okay, what's a major alien invasion where aliens are much more powerful than human story you can think of? Because all of the ones I'm thinking of, I don't think you've read. Have you read The Culture by Ian M. Banks?
No.
Okay. I'm trying to think. But basically, you can conceptualize it, right?
Mm-hmm.
The whole... Basically, a species of Superman arrives on Earth.
Yes.
Whether they're peaceful or not, it doesn't really matter for the context of the story. But the idea is, given that humanity is so old and the historical record is so poor, what if, in the distant past, I'm talking like 100,000 years ago, there was an entire society of human wizards who later retreated from the mortal world?
Um.
And then the wizards fight the aliens.
Mm.
That's my basic idea, is the whole concept of, well, your powerful alien civilization has been wandering the universe for 20,000 years, but what if 100,000 years ago there was magic in the universe? And the magic has since faded, or at least receded to an invisible level.
It sounds like an interesting idea. For sure. I don't know.
I like...
It,
Yeah?
I don't know if you're. Oh, I never know how to pronounce this, but couching this as something that may have actually happened, but
Oh, I don't believe it actually happened. I'm just like, for like urban fantasy purposes, it could work.
Mm-hmm. No, it definitely could.
No, the reason it interested me is because human beings are really bad at grasping the scale of history.
Mm.
You as a historian should know this, even though you are a modern historian. I'm sure you've at least dipped your toes into just historical timescales in general, right?
Well, people don't seem to realize just how, for example, just how long ancient Egypt was around, for example.
Exactly, yes. We are closer to Cleopatra than Cleopatra was to actual ancient Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
There were already uh, archaeologists researching ancient Egypt in ancient Egypt before the birth of Christ.
Yeah.
So it's a history is long, and there probably are entire civilizations that rose and fell that we just have no idea of.
Hmm.
Right? Like, civilization and agriculture are only about 10,000 years old,
Hmm.
but that's not to say, like, I don't know if this is scientific consensus, but do we know if that was actually the first time civilization and agriculture actually emerged, or is it possible that it did emerge previously, but for some reason or the other, it and its traces were wiped out?
Sorry. Repeat that first bit.
So we know that civilization and especially agriculture are about 10,000 years old.
Hmm.
Yes?
Yeah.
But given how difficult it can be to trace like more older historical records, is it possible, or I don't know if this is known in the historical community, is it possible that agriculture and civilization emerged a separate time earlier, but was like wiped out?
Oh, I mean, it's distinctly possible. You're talking about civilizations that we, have no knowledge of. I mean, there probably have been civilizations that have been wiped out that record then hasn't records of them haven't then existed. Um,
Yeah, especially because there was like a whole ice age,
mhm.
right? Like, I'm pretty sure like glacial movements and freezes would be pretty good at erasing the traces of
Mhm.
like irrigated fields and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
And we do know for a fact that the flood myth has some historical basis in the sense that because of the ice age and stuff, I'm sure there were some pretty immense floods. Maybe not to the extent of like drowning the entire planet, but I'm sure for the people who lived around the floods,
I mean
it
that's
felt
I
like
mean I
that,
mean
right?
that's the thing. It's all a matter of context, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, if you only know of the area to a certain degree around you, and then that area, for example, gets hit by a massive tsunami, then you are going to believe that everything around you has flooded.
Yeah, it's so yes, I really do enjoy thinking about things like this is cuz like it's a big area that you can
Hmm.
work with when you're writing fantasy.
Yeah.
Right? If you're writing like purely if you're writing urban fantasy or stuff like that, I think the mistake that a lot of people make is they just they set their ancient civilizations too early,
Mm.
right? Like saying, "Oh, Atlantis existed like around the time of the ancient Egyptians." A bit too early. We would have seen records.
Mm.
Atlantis itself is a whole dubious concept, and I'm still half convinced that it's actually just Australia.
Again, very possible. Um, I mean, to a certain extent, stuff like that is what Jim Butcher did with Codex Alera. Taking
Yeah.
taking a legend like
Yes,
the
kind of.
Lost Roman Legion and using it to create a world.
My man's did basically say that the entire Lost Roman Legion got isekai'd.
Yeah. And hey, it was ended up being
No,
a quite
Codex
fun
Alera is
fun.
technically an isekai.
Yeah, no, it is, and it ended up being a fun concept. I mean, the entire world of Codex Alera is a world of isekai pupils.
Yep. In a wood elves, yetis, furries, and of course Romans.
And the Borg. Don't forget the Borg.
Well, they're more the Zerg.
Zerg, whatever. I never remember which one it is.
Yeah, the Borg are no Borg are robots, Zerg are bugs.
Hmm.
Yeah, you do have to. It's funny how they overlap so much, isn't it?
Yeah.
They're basically the same thing, except the only difference being the whether they're biological or mechanical.
Hmm.
I wonder if anyone's ever thought to fight the Borg by just pointing them in the direction of the Zerg. Though usually, it's funny. Usually, settings only have one,
Hmm.
and that's actually, huh? Most of the stories I read go in the bug direction for their hive mind, but that's probably some unexcavated real estate, isn't it?
Hmm.
A setting where there's both the Borg and the Zerg. Because usually everyone's like, oh yes, there's this hive mind that wants to consume and assimilate the rest of the universe. But what if there were competing hive minds that want to consume and assimilate the entire universe?
It would suck for anyone stuck in the middle.
I mean, are you sure it wouldn't be a let them fight situation?
It would very much depend, where the civilization suffering from this was located. If you were stuck right in the middle of the two of them, then yeah, it would not be a good time. But if you're somewhere off to the side and you could just watch from afar, then yeah, you might be able to get away with it. But you also then have to be wary that whichever one wins is going to come for you next.
I mean, I'd assume that considering the fact that they are basically equal, right? Like, so it's very difficult to see anything but a stalemate in that case. Because like the advantage is the perfect counter to a hive mind is actually another hive mind because their biggest
Mm.
advantages are centralized intelligence and endless waves of like drones and unintelligent, or rather endless waves of bodies, right? So if a centralized intelligence that just throws bodies at the problem meets another centralized intelligence that just throws bodies at the problem, what are they gonna do?
Maybe it'll be like Futurama when Zap Brannigan heroically defeated the Killbots by sending wave after wave of his men into them until they hit their kill limit.
Ah, yes, there's a reason it's called human wave tactics, even though fictionally it's mostly bugs that do it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the point is that we are talking about fiction, so it would be on the writer to basically go, okay, well, this one is going to win. Um, for this reason, let's say. You know, either either the Borg win because the Zerg can't reproduce quick enough, or the Zerg win because the Borg don't have the resources to keep going, sort of thing.
It would basically come down to a resource war.
Hmm.
Because whether it's the Zerg or the Borg, they both they can't make something out of nothing.
Yeah.
So it would basically would come down to who ran out of bodies first.
Hmm.
But yeah, it definitely also would set up a situation that would make for a very convenient and easy third party,
Hmm.
right? Like the winner is not would not be in good shape. That they're close enough in just conceptually that the winner would basically just barely eke out a victory and then be vulnerable for
Hmm.
the others to swoop in.
It'd be one of those situations again, like in Codex Alera with the Vord, of if you let one of them survive, then you are screwed later down the line.
Yeah. So I don't know. Hive minds are always interesting. Grand scales are always interesting.
Hmm.
But yeah, but back to the subject of the historical stuff. I do enjoy thinking about those gaps in history, and it's part of the reason I love the Silurian hypothesis so much,
Hmm.
which we've talked about it before, right?
I'm not sure. I know Silurian, if only because of Doctor Who.
Yes, it is that they are based on the thought experiment. Basically, the idea is that the Earth is so old that it's entirely possible there was a sapient species before humanity. It's very unlikely to have happened, but it is like it's one of those things where we don't really have a definitive way of knowing one way or the other,
Yeah.
and it's fun to think about. Like, is it likely? No. Did it happen? Very probably not.
Mm.
But there is a non-zero possibility.
Yeah.
And that's but yeah, that they are the Silurians from Doctor Who are in fact based on that.
Going back to the hive minds thing for a quick second.
Oh, feel free.
My parents have been bringing up some of my old stuff from my grandparents' house, which is where it was stored 'cause it's fucking huge. Um, One of the things they actually brought up was I guess like collected comic sort of thing for an Age of Ultron story,
Ooh, okay.
which was relatively interesting now that I do have more experience with comic book stuff in general. Um, it's by I'm not sure if you know the story, but it's by Brian Michael Bendis.
Oh, it's a Bendis, huh?
Hmm.
Bendis is a character. He has written some of the best like comic stories in the DC Marvel continuum.
Hmm.
He's also written some of the worst stories in the DC Marvel continuum.
Do you know where this particular one falls?
I'd have to know what the exact story is, but I'm not. I admit I'm not that into the Marvel side of things.
So basically,
Or rather, not that into the Avengers side of things. With Marvel, I'm more of a Spoderman person,
I mean,
I
it was
suppose.
basically an everybody is here sort of thing, or everybody who
Yeah,
is
well,
still
yes, of
alive
course.
is here.
Yes, of course.
Basically, fucking Henry Pym created Ultron. Ultron came back in some shape or form and took over the world.
Yes, as he does.
Basically, like large parts of the world in general, I think, are basically hellscapes with like the heroes basically having to hide underground. Fucking, oops.
Did it feature the Avengers kids, or was it not
Avengers,
that far ahead?
not that far ahead. It was Avengers
Okay.
themselves.
Okay.
Uh,
So like, here's the problem. I know that this is probably a well-known Bendis story, but there's like 9 separate storylines that fit this exact description. So
um,
I
so
have no idea which one specifically it could be.
so specifically, Ultron was controlling Vision from the future.
All right, that narrows it down to about 3 to 5.
And basically what happened is they went to the Savage Land in Antarctica, found
Okay.
found
Okay, this is starting to sound familiar to me. Yeah.
found Fury in a bunker, went back in time using a Doom time platform. Well, no,
Yes. Okay.
sorry. A group of heroes went into the future to fight Ultron. I'm fairly sure they all died because I'm fairly sure there's a shot of fucking Cap getting his head blown off.
Yes, of course. No,
But then
I think this is starting to ring bells, and I'm pretty sure this is probably not his best work, I would say.
then Wolfie and Sue Storm went into the past, and Wolfie basically murdered Henry Pym.
He does. Not only does Wolvie have a tendency to do that sort of thing, you'd be surprised how many stories can be resolved by murdering
Mm-hmm.
Hank Pym.
Then the two of them go back to the supposed present to find that, as it turns out, it was a very bad idea to murder Henry Pym because things have gone quite poorly. I'm fairly sure Tony Stark is half a body in one of his suits and is like the emperor of the world, maybe. Um, and Morgana Le Fay is attacking from Asgard, sort of thing.
Yeah, okay, this is sounding familiar, but yes, generally speaking, I think this is probably not one of his best, though it might be reasonably well liked.
I thought it was sort of interesting. Also, I only learned this while doing a bit of research on it on the wiki. Although Spider-Man does appear and is rescued by Hawkeye, as it turns out, it's actually Doc Ock in
Oh,
Peter's
so
body.
this was during the Superior Spider-Man era. Okay, so this is a recent one.
It's like
Well,
2013.
okay, look, my brain is still stuck in
I'm aware.
DC Rebirth
I'm
line,
aware
so
that, fucking comics have a long history, so 2013 does count as
it
recent
is.
enough.
It might actually be the most recent Age of Ultron. I think there might have been one after that, but it's
Mhm.
probably either the most recent or the second most recent Age of Ultron.
Yeah. But it ends with basically all of this shit that Wolverine time traveling twice because he travels back to stop his past self from fucking killing Pym.
I just don't like. Why do so many writers just decide, all right, the solution is going to be Wolverine traveling back in time?
Yeah.
Do you have any idea how often he does that?
Mhm.
I don't know why, because it has nothing to do with his personality or power set or anything. Just like after Days of Future Past, everyone decided, oh, okay, traveling back in time is now Wolverine's thing.
Yeah. Well, it didn't. It did not go well because it basically broke the space-time continuum. Galactus turns up in fucking Miles Morales' universe. Um, there was some woman called Angela, I think it was, who did not seem happy to be in a different universe. Um, yeah, things didn't go especially well.
Yes, yeah, that tends to happen.
Apparently, there was like a sequel to it, so
But yeah, it's definitely relatively recent, quote unquote. But the Age of Ultron does tend to be a pretty recurring theme.
hmm.
But yeah, he's definitely he's got some good Daredevil and Spider-Man stuff.
Hmm.
Bendis. Though again, it's he's also got some really bad Daredevil and Spider-Man. Like he's a very mixed bag.
Hmm.
That man. Uh, but yeah, yes, for some reason, the collective Marvel's comics existence has decided that Wolverine's thing is time travel.
Yeah. To be fair, it was less that Wolverine's thing in this one was time travel, and more his thing was murder in this one.
No, that's just also his thing.
His thing in general.
Yes, murder is his thing in general, but some people have specifically decided that sometimes the murder involves time travel.
Mm-hmm.
Which, is, I still like. God, time travel is such an annoying topic to think about and write about.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, there's very few ways to do it without being like just nonsensically like difficult to comprehend. So I'm just like it. Honestly, the best way to do it is when you just hand wave it away as wibbly wobbly timey wimey stuff.
The Doctor Who method is generally pretty good, yeah.
It's generally the best way of dealing with it. Yes. God, I miss Capaldi.
Capaldi is certainly when his stuff was airing was criminally underrated.
Capaldi was basically the only thing that kept that entire like 2 or 3 series afloat. Like he was the writing and the direction butchered him, but he still has one of the best like performances of the Doctor, bar none.
Capaldi is just a fantastic actor in general, yeah. And
Yeah,
it's
and
clear that
just
he
like
just absolutely adored the role. I would say, honestly, I would say his first season was weak. Because, I mean, me personally, I hated the Danny Pink stuff.
and Clara, of course. Ugh.
I don't mind Clara. Like, she could be so much worse, and she's not. Like, it's. I think it works a lot better in that second season, because it does bring a good conclusion to that of she is trying to be too much like the Doctor without actually being the Doctor, and therefore things go badly wrong for her.
Yeah,
Um,
just but yeah, like he had some great moments.
hmm.
Uh,
I mean that.
Capaldi versus the Boneless, one of the like best in the
Yeah.
series overall. He basically did a "You Shall Not Pass" to an entire multiverse.
Hmm. It's
But,
the fucking war speech with the Zygons is what always gets me.
mhm. But yeah, like Capaldi was a phenomenal doctor who was
Mm.
basically shackled by his showrunners.
Mm.
Uh,
If Capaldi was shackled by riders, what happened to fucking Jodie?
oh god, I feel so bad for her.
Mm.
She was like, okay, I will say there were some hiccups with her portrayal of the Doctor.
To a certain extent, I think it is an issue of the writing because the
A
way
lot of it is the writing, yes.
the way that her Doctor was portrayed was one of basically trying to not wanting to get too attached again, and therefore being incredibly chatty while not actually saying anything of like real significance.
Yeah, but
And hiding stuff
yeah,
about herself. But
yeah,
again,
I think
that is a hard line to walk, and
yeah,
it
yeah,
requires
and I
good
think
writing, which did not happen.
yeah, but like even like aside from the writing, I think she seemed a bit unsure of what she wanted her own Doctor to look like at times.
Mm.
Like with people like Capaldi and Smith, you can immediately tell that they have an idea of what their Doctor is going to be. But
Mm.
like, it wasn't just what's her last name?
Whitaker.
Yeah, it's not just Whitaker. Like, I think Tennant, as great as he is, also had some moments. Like, I love David Tennant, but I will say 10 is not my favorite. Mostly because I think there were a few. I don't know. I just like the general lightheartedness balanced with ancient eldritch time entity
Mm.
that Smith and Capaldi brought to the table better than Tennant's portrayal.
Mm. I mean, look, we've given Capaldi his props. I want to give Smith his props because
He was great, yeah.
considering he was also, the youngest actor to be Doctor Who at that point, you know, the
Was
way.
was he? I thought that was Eccleston.
No. Eccleston was at least in his 30s when he was doing Doctor Who. Smith was like 26.
Oh, I didn't realize he was that young.
Yeah, no, he was super young.
Oh, okay, yeah, no, like, no, Matt Smith. Not only did Matt Smith really got the dream role because he had a pretty decent. His series had pretty decent writing as well.
Mm.
Like, there's some pretty good storylines during Eleven's run.
Mm. I think the only thing you can accuse Matt's run with is Moffat getting a bit too intricate with some of the overarching plots, but even then, I think they overall work themselves out well enough.
Yeah, but but like he also had the advantage of like very solid companions,
Yeah.
right? Like I think that was part of Whittaker's problem is that they didn't really know what to do with the companions.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like, the Doctor isn't the Doctor you can never take in a vacuum. The Doctor is simply not designed to be alone,
Yeah. No, absolutely.
like, from a
Mm-hmm.
writing perspective. So, the Pawns were, like, a really good set of companions for 11. And then he and 12 got stuck with Clara near the end. And then Bill was kind of just there.
I did like Bill when I watched the
She's
series.
likable, like, she was likable enough. It's just they didn't seem to know what to do with her.
Hmm.
Like, the character was likable, but they didn't give her anything to do. And then she turned into weird space goop at the end. Something lesbian space goop.
Mm-hmm.
This is probably something. There's a joke to be made there. But yeah, what? How did we get onto who?
Time travel. And we.
Right. Comics to time travel to Doctor Who.
Yeah.
Yeah. Huh.
I mean, if there is any other comic runs you would short
No,
form comic
I
runs
had a
you would
couple of
recommend, I'd be somewhat willing to take a look.
I mean, if I'm gonna recommend you to consume media, it's going to be some comics are very far down the list.
That's fair.
Well, no, I can actually recommend two very short single issues, or actually not two, one.
Mm.
Action Comics issue 1000.
Right.
It's essentially a collection of Superman shorts, and the majority of them basically capture like the essence of what makes Superman a good character.
Fair enough.
They're just like short. You don't really need any. There's no storyline or outside context. You can just read them as is.
Yeah.
With the exception of the one. Funnily, it's funny we've gone full circle, except the one by Bendis. Because the Action Comics 1000, one of these short stories was the pilot to Bendis's run of Superman during Rebirth.
Right.
And as a result, it was not self-contained. Or rather, it was the start to a longer story. I never actually read the full arc that Bendis did for Superman, but that one was definitely the weakest in the Action Comics 1000 collection, simply because of it was a pilot episode. It wasn't actually a full story like the others were.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, if you have to read something, read that one. It's very short. It's a single issue, so it's very good. It's I think 3 or 4 very good stories. One of them is literally just Superman and Lex Luthor talking, and it's one of the best in the entire run.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, actually, this is somewhat relatable to related to the comics talk. How do you feel about the trope refusal of the call?
I mean,
yes,
are you
familiar with the trope?
I'm familiar with it. I mean, again, it's a case of very dependent on how it's done.
It is a very execution-heavy one. Can you think of some examples where, off the top of your head, where it was done either well or poorly that stick out to you?
Sorry, I'm shooting smugglers at the moment, so I'm a little distracted. When was done well? When wasn't it done well?
Doesn't have to be both. It can be either or.
Let me pause because I do need to think about this. I'm very bad at thinking about this stuff off the top of my head.
ADHD will do that to you.
Yeah, I hate whenever this happens because in general I could probably think up examples, but when I'm actually asked and put on the spot, I got no fucking idea. Everything just vacates my brain.
It is an unfortunate thing.
Right. I'm gonna take the easy way out. Just go to the TV tropes page to get fucking
That is a
examples.
good idea, yes.
So once I actually see them, I will remember it. Uh, it's just about actually fucking getting it. As long as TV tropes doesn't fail me. Da, da, da. Suicide is true. I mean, obviously, a fairly significant example in the world of certainly anime is Shinji from Evangelion.
Getting the robot Shinji.
Yeah.
So okay. I do have a point that I'm getting to. That I think there's a few things that are very important to execute refusal of the call well.
Mm.
And I think the most important thing is the character who is refusing the call in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
What I mean is, it is very easy to make a character unlikable
Mm.
when they refuse the call excessively.
Yeah.
Let me give you an example specifically. And there's another one. Okay, there's two things. First of all is the character's likability, obviously, the general charisma of the character. But I think there's another thing that is maybe less talked about. Dramatic irony. So, like, you're familiar with the gist of dramatic irony, yes?
Yeah.
The idea, I'll just explain anyway for the listeners. The idea that the audience or the reader knows something that the characters don't.
Hmm.
And my my general conjecture is that I think dramatic irony can be worse
Than
than for refusal of the call,
right.
in the sense that when the when the character is refusing the call, if they are doing it without bits of knowledge that the audience does have, even if the character is generally likable, that could end up making the refusal of the call like
Mm.
leave a bad aftertaste.
In fairness, that's partly to do with modern audiences' inability to understand uh, the general concept of dramatic irony, and that they may know something that the character doesn't.
So I agree in part. And the reason it's only in part is because I do think, to a certain extent, the degree matters.
Mm.
Like, the author does need to pay attention to how significant the information revealed to the audience versus the individual is. And maybe also the accessibility of that information to the character.
Mhm.
For example, if it's information that the character could not have possibly known, then okay, yes, I can understand why that's fine.
Mm.
But if it is information that was within reach of the character and they simply did not, they chose not to, or they took an action that meant that they didn't. Like, for example, let's say it's a secret that the character's dad knows that the character doesn't.
Yeah.
And then they normally have a very good relationship and talk to each other
Hmm.
about stuff, important things.
Yeah.
But the hero receives the call and then immediately refuses without even like thinking of having a chat with old dad.
Yeah.
You can see how that can be rub people the wrong way, right?
So I'm not sure if that's the best example, because in that situation where they have gotten used to, discussing, or yeah, used to discussing, important information with, let's just say a parent in general. Um, if they are told, and depending on the source, maybe, an untrustworthy source, and they go, your dad's been keeping this from you. This is, you're a chosen one, your dad's been keeping this from you, whatever. Then there is a reason for that character, that main character, to go, well, I have this, relationship with my parent where we, don't lie to each other. So what reason do I have to believe you?
Okay, so I can understand you are thinking. So the reason I actually brought up Boy and his dad, I was actually thinking of a specific story that really annoyed me with the refusal of the call.
Right.
So
Is it a story I would know?
no, not at all. It's a story I barely know because again, I read the first few chapters, didn't like how it went, and then promptly forgot about it. Well, I didn't forget about the annoyances, but I forgot everything else, like the title, the author.
Hmm.
I can go into my Kindle history and probably find it, but it was years ago now.
Mhm.
I just remembered it the other day, which is why I noted it down. So, you've posited a very likely scenario. Let me run you through the specific scenario of that story.
Right.
Upon reaching majority, people receive a class. This is one of the. It was. I read it because I was in a book drought, and sometimes lit RPGs are better than nothing. Also, they're far too common in the modern day.
Mhm.
Um, Basically, everyone upon reaching the age of majority receives a class. Uh, Boy is like constantly in search of adventure, but also is like, well, it's not too bad being a farmer. Very good relationship with his dad, talks about it, and he's not timed or anything when he receives his class choice. Uh, but he does not at any point, like, he just impulsively declines and chooses farmer
Right.
instead of hero.
Yeah.
When in fact, if he had just talked to his dad, he would have learned, oh well, actually you can do both. Uh, which his father demonstrated on an attack the very night of. So it's like, well, you've established, and I think this is another thing. Timing matters.
Mm.
Because when the refusal of the call happens, like within the first few pages of the book, with only a little bit of establishing character moments,
Yeah.
it's a lot harder to stomach. When the character is already like sort of whiny and annoying,
Mm.
and then immediately
I mean,
later
it
refuses the
obviously
call.
does depend on the character themselves that is refusing the call and what they are like. Because an example that I found on TV tropes, The Matrix,
Referring to Neo or Cypher.
Neo.
Okay.
Because Neo
Yeah.
does initially refuse the call, almost literally. Um,
I mean, he's kind of refusing the call up until the very end.
to a certain extent, yeah.
Because, like, the first thing he refuses is the call to, like, leave the Matrix.
Hmm.
But after that, him being the one is sort of something he grapples with
Yeah.
and doesn't really. He's right. He does spend a lot of the early parts of the movie when he's not doing kung fu with Lawrence Fishburne. He's basically being like, "Can I like not be the chosen one,
Hmm.
please?
Yeah. No, exactly.
I'll go to the uh, sweat rave, but maybe I'll pass on the chosen one stuff."
Hmm. But yeah, that initial refusal of the call is within the first few minutes of the movie, but what it allows is you know basically a establishing of the setting.
I mean, how we can always turn back the clock to, as always, Grandpa Tolkien. Frodo
Hmm.
refuses the call to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Like, well, no, Bilbo definitely refuses the call.
Bilbo more than Frodo, yeah.
Frodo had some hesitation.
Frodo never really refused the call. Frodo complained about the call, which is honestly relatable.
No, yes, of course. But no, yeah, Bilbo spent basically the first 4/5 of the book kicking and screaming and flailing against the call.
Mm.
But yeah, I think but yes, refusal of the call is very dependent. I think it's not, but what I'm trying to get at is it's not just the character. It's the context, and I think there are elements where there are bits of dramatic irony that stretch the suspension of disbelief.
Mm.
Like, anytime, like, this is just a general thing. Dramatic irony in and of itself is something that requires some thought and execution.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, when the characters have no way of knowing, that's dramatic irony.
Mm.
When the characters could have known with a simple conversation, that's just needless angst.
Yeah.
Right? Like, a lot of the times in a lot of authors, whether in the modern day or in the older times, seem to believe that dramatic irony can be accomplished just by switching viewpoints and having characters be a bit cagey, where in fact a single relatively simple conversation would have resolved it.
Mm.
Right? Like, there's no end to entire stories where the most frustrating parts of the story could have been resolved if the protagonists just like
fucking talk to each other. Yeah.
Once.
No,
Yes.
absolutely.
And people can, and a lot of authors seem to conflate that with dramatic irony, which is why I think just it's made people very gun shy, or like very hesitant to even approach dramatic irony, especially readers.
Yeah.
Yes, go on.
I mean, I was just gonna say, the whole miscommunication trope is obviously a big thing in romance works, and Jesus fucking Christ, am I now tired of it? A lot of the time, I'm watching these romance anime, going, for the love of God, just fucking talk, please.
Yeah, actually, a book I was reading recently, which is quite good, by the way. It's called the series is called Soul Home.
Mm-hmm.
It's a non-lit RPG. It is an isekai, unfortunately, though. It does play with the trope a little bit, but it does feature a couple of disaster lesbians. And the main character, who is a grumpy old man, he's like 60-something years old, eventually just barges into the room, yells at them both to just talk to each other, and then locks them in the room until they have a conversation about their feelings. Which was a very fun moment. It's a good series. I would recommend it. It's a cultivation series. Right? Except the trick is, instead of advancing their core, they're building a house in their soul.
Okay.
Yeah, and the way they build it, different rooms and different materials give them different powers.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very unique cultivation concept. Like, you start with a one-story house, and then each level is literally, you have to push against the sky of your soul and open up more space for another floor.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely one of the more unique power systems I've seen.
Oh, come on, dude. You're saying there's nothing illegal in there when I can see drugs right in fucking front of me. Dude!
What if what if it's just like sugar and caffeine pills and lettuce or like spinach?
Yeah, the fake Soviet Union that I'm working for does not have these, doesn't care. If it's white powder, you're going away.
I see. But yeah, what were we talking about? I got distracted by the drugs.
Refusal of the call and dramatic irony.
Oh, but yeah, basically, like, a lot of authors, because of so many authors in the past, basically equating the miscommunication trope with dramatic irony. When there's genuine dramatic irony done, people are like not really a fan.
Yeah.
Or mainly because they're like already like traumatized. Though I will say, and this is maybe one of my more controversial takes, I just dislike dramatic irony conceptually. As a writer, I can understand the value. As a reader, I'm happier not knowing. Because, like, it's not that I don't understand that that's the point of dramatic irony, but that doesn't make me less frustrated when I encounter it. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, just because I know that that's that's the literary like technique, doesn't mean I have to like the literary technique. So even when it's a genuine piece of dramatic irony where the characters have no way of knowing, and that's what adds the tension, that's not the kind of tension I'm looking for. Right? Like, don't get me wrong, I do love me some slice of life, but I don't mind moments of tension. But I prefer the moments of tension to be more character based than an information gap between character and reader.
Yeah.
Basically, I'd like the source of the tension to be in universe rather than meta.
That's fair.
Where I think you can consider dramatic irony as a sort of like meta narrative device. Right? Like, because it creates tension outside of the context of the work itself.
Here's another example of refusal of the call. Avatar.
You know what? That's an interesting example because I think they did it well in the sense that we didn't find out about it until much later. After we'd already gotten to know the character. Can you imagine?
It's another one that sort of recontextualizes Aang's behavior as well.
Yes.
Because it makes sense why he's taking a more meandering route, let's say.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, it's unfair to have asked the 12-year-old to lock in. But do you think later in life he ever thought about the number of people who were enslaved / died because he didn't lock in?
I'm sure he did. He seems like the type.
Yeah. Yeah. Honestly, I think the stress might have killed him before the iceberg aging did. Because he definitely seemed pretty stressed in his later life.
I mean, there was also just in general a lot of shit happening. Um,
Yeah, being the Avatar presiding over what is essentially the Industrial Revolution cannot have been easy.
while also knowing you were basically the only thing that could keep your culture going.
You know, it's. I wonder. There were probably a lot of people pressuring to have him to have a lot more than 3 kids, huh?
Mm-hmm.
You think they figured out artificial insemination at any point during his lifetime?
Probably not.
I mean, it wouldn't be that difficult, especially with like the magic bending powers.
Hmm.
Like you get a waterbender in there, and you can get kind of.
How
Actually, all you
awkward?
need is a waterbender, basically.
How awkward would that be, though?
Well, obviously, we're talking about the theoretical prospect of using Aang as a sperm donor to attempt to mass produce more airbenders. Obviously, it would be awkward.
Especially considering, let's be honest, the waterbender would most likely be Katara.
Oh, it would definitely be Katara. Uh, like, I mean, they did touch on that in Korra, where they essentially treated Tenzin's wife as not the family, but like that, the whole culture built around them.
Mm-hmm.
Those monks that were not airbenders, but really wanted to be.
Yeah.
The airbender cosplayers, they were basically treating Tenzin's wife as breeding stock. Right? It's just like that there was an entire undercurrent of that there in the series.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, let's move. I was trying not to talk about sex stuff this stream. Mill, I blame you for bringing it up.
I mean, I don't think I. Okay, wow. According to the latest research of the Satekan Road Safety Institute, as many as 90% of all road accidents are caused by cars of a specific color. As of today, all green-colored vehicles are prohibited from entering.
I love that so much because it's so stupid that
Yeah.
it's something that can actually happen in real life.
It's that whole thing of fucking causation and correlation.
It's the drownings and ice cream correlation. Yes.
Yeah.
Uh,
Anyway,
I
another couple that I saw that are of interest to us, obviously, are both Cradle and Dresden Files were represented on the list.
Those are a bit more.
Hmm.
They're both a bit more ambiguous, I think.
So Dresden's was Charity, and her refusal to use her magic.
To be fair, that was an entire character arc thing for her. Not a simple refusal of like, yeah, it's not a straightforward example at all, I think.
And the Cradle one was the monarchs refusing to ascend.
That's also very different because okay. I think one of those the reason I don't consider that part of it is I think the implicit meaning of refusal of the call is that it is about the beginning of the journey.
Hmm.
Right? Like the implicit call that you are refusing is the call of the hero's journey.
Yeah.
So for monarchs who are at basically the end point of their journey, not wanting to go any further, does not equate to refusal of the call from me.
That's fair.
But actually, I was going to pivot to Dresden. Because I have because my next topic is directly related.
Okay.
So I'm sure you've consumed your fair share of media wherein the protagonist is overpowered.
Yeah.
How do you feel about the overpowered protagonist trope?
For the most part, it's pretty shit. I have seen a couple of series that do manage to just about pull it off. I have seen a couple more series that could have pulled it off if they'd actually had any skill in writing. But for the most part, I think as a general concept, it is not very well done. Um,
So I do think there are ways you can do it right.
hmm.
So let me give you an example. There is a story called, it's a Korean web novel called Everyone Else is a Returnee. The premise is that uh, the Earth will be awakened to magic.
Mm-hmm.
And for that to happen, all of the people of Earth will be mystically teleported to other worlds for, like, I think the period of time was for a year, while 1,000 years would pass on Earth.
Right.
To, like, prepare it for the coming of mana. Right? You with me so far?
Mana, the like.
Just the general magical juices.
Okay.
The
Well,
you know
yeah.
the universal magical energy. Yeah, that thing.
I wasn't sure if it was somebody called Mana.
Yeah. Okay. Well, fair enough. Yes, I can see the confusion. The basically it needed to marinate in the mystical juices for 1,000 years
Mm-hmm.
before it could properly support the mystical juices in the population. So basically, the people of Earth were teleported away to do stuff on their own on various planets for a year,
Mm-hmm.
while the Earth was put in a slow, like a time acceleration bubble for 1,000 that would go 1,000 years. You with me so far?
Yes.
The protagonist was missed
Right.
during the relocation. So he literally spent 1,000 years doing stuff.
And
That's the problem.
didn't die.
Because no one aged during that time.
Right. Okay.
Like the 1,000 years passed, but the structures, like the non-sapient animals, the plants, nothing would age. It would just be the time passing. So yes, in that series, that is literally the prologue, as in the premise of the series. Like the synopsis is like, yeah, so that happened. And so that is the reason behind the protagonist being overpowered. Is he's literally, even though he didn't have formal magical training, he's literally 1,000 years ahead of everyone else on the
Right.
planet.
And he didn't go insane on his own?
So there was an angel who later married him with him.
Right. Because why wouldn't
Because
that
it
be?
was, well, no, they were the ones in charge of the thing, so it was their fault that he got missed.
So
So
basically,
basically, heavenly.
because we fucked up, you get to chill with us for 1,000 years.
Yes, essentially. So yeah, that. So yes, he and an angel spent 1,000 years together. The angel went full yandere. That it was very fun. It's a good series with a notable exception, but that's more to do with the fact that it's Korean and there's toxic gender roles. But other than that, it's no fault of the character. It's a fault of the author. The character didn't really do anything bad,
Mhm.
but the author did a bad. Uh, but yeah, so what I'm saying is when there's a very concrete and easily believable reason for the protagonist to be OP, I can accept it. Do you get what I'm trying to say?
Yes.
Again, it's the whole execution is what matters, not the trope itself thing, right? Like, it's the universal rule. And I think even something like overpowered protagonist can be executed decently. Like, are there any overpowered protagonists that you like? Or you think. Actually, you mentioned a couple that could have been good if the writers weren't garbage. What were those?
Um. So the main example that comes to mind for me in that is oh god, what was the full name of it? We shortened it down to Last Dungeon Boonies.
Yes, I'm familiar with this series. The boy from the last dungeon boonies moved to the newbie village.
Yes. And
Again, this is one of those cases where I was familiar with the novel long before it got an anime adaptation.
that's fair. But it is one of those where I looked at it and I went, there are some
It did have a good premise, didn't it?
there are some interesting things you can do with these characters, and you didn't fucking do them. You basically picked the worst choice for every single goddamn character, and it is quite frustrating.
Yeah. That concept of person from a much higher level area suddenly going to a new area where they are considered strong
Hmm.
is one of the more acceptable ways of executing this particular
Yeah.
trope.
But, from what I remember of that one, because it's a few years ago now, and I only really remember it because I did actually read that part of my year-end write-up. I think that was the
You
last one I did.
probably remember more than me because I'm pretty sure I was looking into the book in like 2015.
Mm. But it was a case of, there's a good story you can tell with the protagonist's imposter syndrome. Um, there was a good story you could have told with one of the side characters who, what was it? Was like obsessed with the overpowered protagonist, and there was a point where I think she was like a princess or something, and
Which he was.
it was like the castle got attacked, and she's there waiting for like, oh, Protag-kun will come and be my savior, sort of thing. and like I think she even starts to undress because she's got to receive him properly. It was weird.
Oh no.
Yeah. Actually, let me get it up. Let me get it up so I can get the context. 'Cause I know I wrote about it.
Phrasing.
Where's 2021? Now it's 2020. That's 2021. Yeah. It was like fucking fifth from the bottom for me for that year.
That is a very understandable rating, yes.
Um. So yeah, any sign that it would also transition into a more serious examination of Lloyd's imposter syndrome, I might have been enticed to keep watching. Two big problem characters that I remember: the 100 plus year old lolly chief who perved on the 15-year-old protag pretty much every chance she got, needlessly humiliated a character who was otherwise just a nothing character in every other scene, was bad. And also, she may have helped perpetuate the protag's imposter syndrome. Oh, right, this character, this other character that I was talking about, was also a yandere, which I fucking hate.
Look, let's not tar an entire subgenre with that brush.
I yanderes are one of those, or another one of those where it's so fucking hard to actually get it right. There's almost no point in doing it. Um, but yeah, so quoting from what I wrote. Um, Then there's good old Selen the Yandere, whose only real defining character trait that I could tell was her obsession with Lloyd. I really wish that was an exaggeration, but it really isn't from what I watched. Every conversation she had was focused on Lloyd, and in this day and age, that's really kind of awful for a female character, especially when it could have at least been used better. In episode 4, instead of making a goddamn joke out of Selen's obsession and reliance on Lloyd, which included Selen ranting about how she needed to be partially naked when Lloyd arrived, how much better would it have been for Selen to expect Lloyd to arrive and then accept that he might not and she had to take action on her own? It still allows Lloyd to be the hero, but also advances Selen's character past, oh my god, Lloyd-kun.
So on the subject of yanderes, actually, it's funny you mentioned the execution issues. There's another Korean web novel that's actually a really good one called Fated to be Loved by the Villains, where that's kind of the whole trope.
Right.
That's kind of the whole, like, playing with that is the whole thing, where the protagonist essentially has... So in that series, demons are a big deal, in the sense that demons are basically like eldritch gods.
Right.
The protagonist has a special constitution that makes him particularly attractive to demons.
Yeah, okay.
The demons tend to be yanderes. So
Right.
literally, he is the series is him trying to juggle them and preventing them from destroying the world and also murdering him horribly. It's a lot... I'm not describing it very well, but it's like, it basically takes everything unlikable about it's basically a very good deconstruction / reconstruction of the yandere trope.
Yeah.
Because that's the entire point. It's like, it's an examination of the trope, and the protagonist has to actively be genre savvy and manipulate the trope to literally survive.
Yeah. I mean, in that case, I don't think I would hate, the yanderes in that series, because they're clearly being portrayed as the villains, I'm assuming.
Well, they're more so it's... the characters are demon hosts. They're not the demons themselves.
Right.
And the danger comes from the demons, which are more forces of nature than people.
Right.
And the characters themselves are like have traits and character beyond being yanderes. So yes, it is. It definitely is it is as you said. They're not quite villains, but they're not exactly portrayed as good or healthy.
Because I mean, that's my issue is when
It's not romanticized, is I think
yes,
what you're getting.
yes,
Yeah, that series definitely does not romanticize it. He is basically part of like a big part of his internal monologue is essentially, oh god, my life is literally tap dancing on an avalanche.
Mm-hmm.
Like he is very aware that this is unhealthy and they are dangerous.
Yeah.
But he kind of has to do it anyway, or him and everyone he knows dies.
Mm-hmm.
And what were you saying? Sorry.
Yeah, I mean that's my issue is when it gets romanticized in that sense, and gets sort of waved away, not just by the narrative but by audiences as well. Yeah, that was.
I mean, with audiences, there's no accounting for audiences, really. Like, there's a reason Yandere is probably one of the most popular subtypes of love interest.
Look, I'm just still annoyed how the fucking My Hero fandom went insane over Toga.
Speaking of characters that would have been very interesting if something had actually been done with them.
And especially, people's reactions now is like actually shipping her with Uraraka.
To be fair, she was shipping her with Uraraka.
Yeah, but again, yandere. There are so many better fucking lesbian ships in My Hero that you could focus on, including ones that do involve Uraraka, and yet you focus on the one that is literally a yandere ship with the character that has literally been trying to fucking kill the protagonists the entire series or the entire portion of the series that she's been involved in.
Yeah, you definitely. Yeah, Toga's an example of one of those where definitely the execution was off and you could have done something interesting. But also, people are degenerates, so immediately they saw cute girl yandere and were like, plus. Yeah, no, I can definitely see why you're not a fan of the trope. I have much more complex and nuanced feelings on the trope.
I'm happy having basic bitch feelings about the trope.
I don't know, there's I think the difference is that you are at least somewhat more emotionally healthy than I am. And maybe not having the same mild sociopathic tendencies. Which again should probably reinforce your feelings for the trope if the base requirement for having somewhat positive feelings for the trope is mental illness. Which I do believe, like, I'm pretty sure one of the base requirements for liking Yandere is some form of mental illness. On the part of the audience, not the character.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, I just feel like there's so many better ships out there for any character who, like, is shipped with Toga. I mean, Uraraka, there's fucking Sue, for God's sake. Or if you're being, a head shipper, Izuku himself. Or if you're being an actual, like, amazing person, Todoroki Uraraka.
Todoroki Uraraka, yes, of course. Look, in this house we stand the throuple. Though, honestly, a polycule involving the frog girl would also be acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
Frog plus Icy Hot plus Dekuraka. I'd be down for that. I'm pretty sure the frog would be down for that too.
Mm. I mean, then you get into just a general fucking Deku squad polycule as well.
Nah, I don't. I'm usually a bit more selective with my poly shipping. I think I need something more than just they're the general team, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That one giant furry lady does have to be there, though.
Well, the one that Izuku like saved during
Yes,
the Dark
that one.
Era.
Yes, yeah. Look, Horikoshi is many things, but he knew what he was doing when he drew that character. He knew what he liked when he was drawing Mirko, and he knew what he was doing when he drew that character.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I'm saying. Actually, I did have some. Oh, right. I know we touched on this briefly before. I still have some questions about how, about some of the families in My Hero. Do you remember what I mean?
No. Are these questions going to make me regret my fandom?
I actually don't know.
Okay, go ahead.
So we know quirks are passed on by parents, and we've
Yeah.
seen some of the parents involved.
Mm-hmm.
With Invisible Girl and Frog Girl, why do both their parents have the same quirk? There are two possible implications of this. Either people tend to marry people with the same quirk, which has some problematic implications, or they're related.
I feel like the first has slightly less problematic implications.
But they're still both interpretations are problematic, though. You have to admit that.
The first one doesn't necessarily need to be problematic. You can put a problematic spin on it, but it could just be shared experiences of people with a similar or the same quirk sort of thing.
Because both of Invisible Girl's parents are invisible.
Mm.
And both of Frog Girl's parents are frogs.
I mean, Who better to understand what you go through as an invisible person than another invisible person?
Do you think Invisible Girl's mom had an ex who was a stretchy person who she broke up with because he told her that wives are for kissing, not for talking?
Knowing Horikoshi, probably.
Oh yeah, I mean, he's more of an X-Men guy than a Fantastic Four guy, from what I can tell. X-Men and Spider-Man.
He still has that knowledge
Marvel Comics, yes.
of Marvel Comics, yeah.
Uh, but yeah, I just look. I think My Hero is a great premise that ultimately had some flaws in the execution.
Yeah. No, I would agree.
And but yes, I like.
I mean, if you look at My Hero as a series, I feel like I'm not sure if there is yet a series that does pretty much everything it does, um, and does it better. But there are certainly series out there that do, um, the same individual things as it and does them quite a bit better. I mean,
Yeah, you
in
go
terms of
ahead.
the big shonen cast, I mean, Black Clover does it better than pretty much any other shonen out there.
I would more or less agree with that. Yes.
I mean, Black Clover is a marvel in how it's managed to keep its entire big cast relevant to a certain degree, and especially characters that were introduced at the start of the series that in any other series would have been left behind
Yeah.
long
So what's
ago.
funny? You know what's funny? I almost feel like it does it too well. In the sense that I sometimes feel like characters that really don't need to be remain relevant still remain relevant.
Such as,
Uh, it's been a while since I've read Jack. Well, the Freudian slip said Jack kind of is one and done.
mm,
It's like, yes, we get it. He's the slicey boy. He has
yeah,
who's has a one note personality and a rivalry with Yami. I wouldn't have minded him being left in the dust.
fair enough.
He's had some cool moments, but it's
Mm,
like he just didn't really need to. We have enough good stuff at home. Uh
that's fair.
there's a couple of others. I can't think of them off the top of my head because I haven't actually interfaced with Black Clover since it left Jump,
Yeah.
really.
Hmm.
Uh but and I was kind of falling off of that last. Maybe I'll probably once it ends, I'll probably like read through the rest of it.
Hmm.
But I was definitely falling off
Yeah.
of the last arc because I'm sure you understand why.
Mm.
Like it does very much have the energy of some of the other shonen where it reached a really solid ending point and then kept going.
Mm.
Like I can sort of understand why it made the decisions it did, but it really just could have ended after the Spade Kingdom arc, I think.
Yeah. I don't
Because
mind. I
like
don't mind what it's been doing. I think it has been hampered by both Tabata's health problems and the move to Giga. Um, It's one of them their green cars that's causing all of the accidents. You piece of shit. Trying to bring a green car into my country. Um, but yeah,
Yeah,
I'm certainly, once the series is over, going to do at the very least a reread of this final arc, if not a reread of the entire series itself.
we'll
Um,
definitely have to do a retrospective, I think.
mhm.
Uh, but yes, but yeah, MHA, I think.
MHA is I think, more than any of the other sort of 2010s new gens, um, suffers from the problem of overcorrecting from the mistakes of its seniors.
Yes, we've discussed this at length, but
We have
yes.
discussed this before, yeah. The whole concept of um, it somewhat smartly, I would say fairly smartly, realized that, or Horikoshi smartly realized that going for 700 chapters was not a good idea. Um, but didn't put in the work to change the story structure or the
I was
character
gonna say,
structure.
yeah, that was one of its biggest issues. Is it introduced too much for the scope of the story it wanted to tell?
Mm.
Like it.
And again, it went the usual shonen route of introducing new characters each arc, when it shouldn't have, because it already had a fucking huge cast. And it didn't need to do that because of its huge cast. What it could have done is focus on, characters, 2 or 3 characters in 1A each arc, instead of continually introducing new characters.
Do you know what actually did do that pretty well?
Mm-hmm.
Ass Class.
Yeah, no, Ass Class is a very good example of a, new gen shonen.
Of a new gen shonen that did the ensemble cast well.
Yeah.
Not
And
only is it a new gen shonen that did the ensemble cast well, it also had a very solid beginning, middle, and end that it planned for and executed.
well, again, that is, it learnt from the mistakes of its forebears. Of it set itself a fucking end date. It said, look, this series is going to end once we get to the end of this school year. It's not going past that. That is the end. We are not setting ourselves some, big overall goal like Nagisa is going to become fucking Prime Minister of Japan, and get his fucking face on Japanese Mount Rushmore. Um, he's not searching for something abstract like being the strongest in the world or the universe or the multiverse. Like, I don't know enough about Bleach to make a snide remark as to its extent, but
It literally the goal of the antagonist is to become God. So you were kind of on the mark.
Nagisa wasn't trying to become God. He was getting to the end of the year. And as a
Yeah,
result,
I think
it knew what it wanted to cover in that time. I would say that it still had an issue of there are 28 kids in that class, and probably 20 of them were probably relevant at one point or another, and the other 8 or so sort of fell by the wayside.
but that's already a higher proportion than the majority of other
I mean,
series.
fucking My Hero had 20 students in its class to begin with, and still didn't manage to make more than, like, I would say 6 or 7 of them relevant.
So I think but yeah, Ass Class did do a lot of stuff right. And You've got me thinking. There's kind of two flavors of shonen protagonist.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the second flavor has been gaining, or like they fluctuate in popularity.
Mm.
There's the proactive and the reactive protagonists. Proactive protagonists are your Narts and your Astas and your Dekus,
Mm-hmm.
where they have a dream that they want to fulfill.
Mm-hmm.
And reactive protagonists are your Bleks and your fairy tales, and to a certain extent, S-Class even, where they are sort of just trying to get by, and the world keeps throwing things at them
Mm-hmm.
that they then have to deal with. Because, like, yes, Nagisa's trying to get to the end of the year, but I think the fact of the matter is he doesn't really have this grand aspiration
No.
at the start of the series.
The point of the
Ichigo from
series
Bleach doesn't.
the point of the series is giving him an aspiration of any kind.
Yes, and a similar thing happens in Bleach and Fairy Tail, where they're kind of just they're chilling, and things happen that force them to not be chill,
Mm-hmm.
to the detriment of the things that force them to not be chill. Whereas with like Asta or Naruto, they want to be the guy.
They want to be the
They
very
want to be
best, like no one ever
that no one
was.
ever wins. Yes, yes, that guy did things too. But side note, did you know that there's a Pokemon fan fiction where a person from Earth is reincarnated as a Ditto
No,
in the anime?
I did not know that.
Well, would it make sense to you if I told you it was smut?
Yes, it very much would.
I
Oh,
believe the first capture target is Ash's mom.
that makes sense. On the subject of fan fiction, what do you think of the idea I suggested about the almost quiz
Yes, smut
of
or angst.
smut or angst?
The problem is that a lot of them are both.
The point is that I would be curating which ones I would be quizzing you on, and I would be the one quizzing you because I'm the expert, and I'm taking that
Okay,
as
well,
my
look,
prerogative.
I know you. I know you are more current with it, but I would say I've also read quite my share of fan fiction. Thank you very much.
Look, somebody has to be in charge, and I'm just gonna.
No,
say
I'm
it's
happy
gonna be
with
me.
you being in charge. I'm just saying, just because you're the expert doesn't mean I'm some sort of amateur.
No, okay. We will make sure to emphasize that you are also an expert, and that Jack is very much the
Jack is the
novice.
sweet summer child who we will traumatize.
Yeah.
But yes, yeah. So it does, because that's been fluctuating a lot recently. Like, for example, Inuyasha, I would say, was the more reactive type, wasn't he?
I don't know. I didn't watch Inuyasha
Okay,
or
fair
read it. There was a part of me that froze there when you asked me as if I knew. It's like,
I thought there were some. Given our generation, I thought there were some that were just sort of universal, but I guess some fell through the cracks.
You have to understand that I didn't really properly get into anime until, like, the late 2010s.
I'm pretty sure the final season of Inuyasha was airing at the time, but anyway, the Elric brothers are very much the proactive types because they have a grand aspiration. So it's funny how the entire structure of the story kind of changes.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, One Piece is transcendental, so we don't really count it.
Yeah,
I honestly, at this
whenever we're
point,
talking about stuff like this, I just don't include One Piece. It's a fucking
me too.
it's
It's just
yeah. There's just no
oh,
quantifying it with anything else at this point.
do you know what made me upset?
What?
I have a classmate in my one of my classes this semester who called it mid piece.
Oh, oh.
I'm just like, I'm never gonna say anything to their face, but I immediately think less of them.
Mm. As you should.
But yeah, I just wonder what makes an author decide whether or not they're gonna have a proactive or reactive protagonist
Mm.
in that sense. Because with the reactive ones, you often get the scenario where the protagonist is trying to live their life, and it's the villains who have a grand aspiration,
Mm.
which is causing them trouble.
Yeah. I mean,
Like the. Yes, go ahead.
I mean, we are both writers.
Mm-hmm. Allegedly.
Allegedly. What kind are your protagonists?
I mean, I have too many protagonists to. Uh, okay. Now that I think about it, actually, I do lean towards the reactive protagonist.
Hmm.
I would say, on average, I have more protagonists who are just doing their thing and then have to deal with other people causing problems than I do protagonists who have some sort of grand aspiration.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, I think I personally lean more in the reactive direction, which is perhaps reflective of my personality in some way. What about you?
I mean, certainly the protagonist that I'm writing at the moment is on the reactive side. I think we've discussed how it has been something that I have had to try and work on in making sure my character still has agency while all of
Yes,
this is
you can.
happening
It
to
is
him.
possible. It is very much that's the big, I would say, obstacle of reactive protagonists is ensuring that the character still has agency.
Mm-hmm.
It can be hard to make a character who's reacting to situations who have like agency. So it's a balancing act for sure.
I'm gonna be honest, dude.
Um,
I'm 100% certain you're a smuggler, so I'm not even gonna look at your documents.
I thought you were talking to me for the first half of that sentence, and I was afraid I was going to hear something I didn't want to hear.
What? I'd finally unearthed your smuggling ring through Canada.
Listen, we can talk about that off camera. But no, but anyway, also my smuggling operation is mostly overseas. Anyway, Bleach, I think about Bleach sometimes. Cause like Kupo did his research and certainly has a flair for symbolism.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's a lot of obscure like Buddhist and like old religious symbolism in his work.
Mm-hmm.
And he has some great art, great character design, and some of like the coolest powers in the genre.
Mm-hmm.
He's just not a very good writer.
Mm.
Like, I think if you were to give the IP to like a really solid writer and just retain Kubo as the artist slash world building guy,
Mm-hmm.
there's like a very good series there that does not involve Mr. I am a hybrid of all four in universes races fear me. Also, that there's a funny thing about Bleach. It has one of the funniest sort of implied endings for a villain in shonen history.
Okay.
So Aizen, the famous villain for the majority of Bleach,
Mm-hmm.
and probably one of the better villains in shonen, because he is very charismatic. It helped by having a phenomenal voice actor in the anime. His consequence after he was defeated by the heroes was he was sent to the deepest, darkest lair of the afterlife's prison for 48,000 years. Do you know what the issue with that is?
No.
He is immortal. So he literally can just serve his time and then be free to
he
go.
can just wait it out.
Yes. Now, granted, that's in the end of the series, and the reason it's notable that he's immortal is that while the magical beings of that universe live for a long time, it is implied that they have a lifespan of about 3,000 to 4,000 years.
Right.
So it's only been like 2 years since he started serving his sentence, but in theory, 48,000 years later, he will have outlived basically everyone and just be free to do whatever he wants.
Mm.
And the implication is that there's been a downward trend in overall power levels, with the exception of... okay, let's talk about this. Why do so many series insist on the older generations being more powerful? Or there being a general downward trend in power level? Such that the modern people are much weaker than the ancients.
Mm.
You get what I'm...
Yeah. I mean, there's a certain element of maybe trying to take advantage of the resentment that younger generations hold towards the older generations. Because obviously, more often than not, we are the protagonists are the younger generation and the antagonists are the older generation.
Okay, yes. I will say, I think that might be more subconscious for a lot of authors.
Probably yes.
I don't think a lot of authors put that level of thought into it.
No, probably not. But there is just an element of the expectation is that the older you get, the more powerful you get.
Well, that's not even necessarily what I mean, because in some of those cases, like there are justified cases.
Hmm.
Uh, like again, I I will I can hate a series, but I can acknowledge when they have points that make sense. Nart. The framing of that is that because the previous generations were constantly at war, there was more of a survival of the fittest thing going on, and everyone who survived was just the cream
Hmm.
of the crop, and also just generally, because everyone was at war all the time, they were just forced to grow stronger quicker
Yeah.
than the modern generation that was raised in a time of peace.
Hmm.
That makes sense to me. And what you said, the idea that okay, you get stronger as you age, uh, that I can accept as well. Again, it's an execution thing, but those two flavors I can generally accept if they're executed decently.
Yeah.
What I'm potentially referring to more is the idea of the ancients who are not necessarily alive anymore being more powerful. The idea of the civilization of precursors are so much more powerful than anything the modern
Hmm.
civilization can do. It's like you go ahead.
I mean, I wasn't going to say anything other than that one. I'm not really sure about.
Well, let me try and think of a relevant example. Uh,
I will say this should probably be the last topic because we are past 2 hours.
okay, yeah. Um, I mean, without getting too into the weeds, like just using the examples that the method you were bringing up of the older people, I don't I sort of like don't like the idea of I guess people were just stronger then,
Hmm.
like in the old days, than they are now.
Yeah.
This is a rhetoric that obviously exists in the real world as well, right? Uh, but I think it falls into the category of necessity rather than any sort of inherent qualities.
Hmm.
But I think just in fiction, in a fantasy world where for some reason the people from like a few hundred years ago or a few thousand years ago were so much stronger and we cannot reach their heights even though we have like thousands. I think it just underestimates the rate at which human beings tend to progress,
Yeah.
right? Like uh humanity very much has explosive bursts of progression, and when you're writing a story involving human beings, because most human beings don't really have a concept of non-human entities, it can trigger some cognitive dissonance.
Hmm. Is there an element of when this happens? It's often in a story that is about how um, the modern world, by comparison to the ancient world, has I guess been more complacent, or has homogenized their powers more.
I think, to a certain extent, yes. I think fantasy worlds tend to have a problem of stagnation.
Hmm.
I do understand it.
Hmm.
One could argue that human civilization was stagnant for almost 8,000 or like thousands of years before the past 200 or 300 years,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like that argument can be made, but even that is discounting the like constant leaps forward that was happening even in ancient times.
Hmm.
Uh, so I think there is an element of that, certainly, that I think authors tend to both overestimate and underestimate how the passage of time has effects on society.
Mm-hmm.
Because like I so often see a setting where obviously there's magic involved, yes, but the idea that the setting remains in a stagnant sort of medieval era for literally 20 or 30,000 years.
Mm-hmm.
Like if it remains stagnant for a few hundred years, I can understand that. That has historical basis. But when you have a setting that apparently has a history of like tens of thousands of years and it hasn't changed at all during that period of time, it it can take me out of it.
Yeah, that's fair.
Because human beings are naturally restless creatures
Mm-hmm.
that tend to cause problems. And on that lovely note, we should probably end it.
Yep. So thank you everybody for watching. Hopefully you've enjoyed. In terms of future stuff, Tuesdays, Thursdays, Saturdays, and Sundays. I, in particular, will not be available on Saturday, but I'm sure Jack and Fuzzy, or one of you, will.
I'm not going to be available on Sunday. I'm not usually available on the weekend, so we might just take a general day off. But we'll see as it comes to that.
Mm-hmm. Um, Otherwise, please do give us a follow here on Twitch and all that YouTube stuff.
Like, subscribe, hit that bell icon, and leave a comment if you enjoyed the video.
And otherwise, hopefully, we shall see you on Thursday. Good night.